we actually wait till exactly 7?
Yeah. That you have to do.
All right.
Yeah, we do have quorum, so that's good.
I know we were there. I can never tell with that clock.
You get to use your phone.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Because I have the same time as you.
Okay. Sorry, we have to wait till 7.
No.
I know we were there. So is that clock right now?
The clock?
Yeah, I mean, it's close.
Yeah, I think it's 7.
Closer than it's been.
These are the instructions for after.
I'll study those during the meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. I'm going to go ahead and call the committee of the whole meeting of the Park Ridge City Council Finance and Budget, Public Works, and Procedures and Regulations to order for Monday, May 22nd. Can we have a roll call, please?
Alderman Moran,
Yeah, here. Yes, I'm here.
Schubert, Mazuka,
Here.
Maladosian,
Present.
Wilkening,
Here.
Mayor Maloney.
Here. All right, first item on the agenda is citizens who wish to be heard on a non-agenda item. So if you're here to speak on something that's not going to be covered later in the meeting, now would be the time. Seeing no one, we'll proceed. Under the mayor's report, I have a few items. Can I do all three of these in one motion? Or do I have to make three separate motions? Okay, so I'm going to ask for all three of these items in one motion. So I'll ask for a motion to approve to adjourn to closed session after the meeting pursuant to 5 ILCS 120/2C1, appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees, as well as for the purpose of selecting a person to fill public office pursuant to 5 ILCS 120/2C3, as well as to approve the minutes of the May 15th, 2017 closed session meeting pursuant to 5 ILCS 120/2C21.
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none. Out to the audience, any questions or comments on us going into closed session on those items at the conclusion of the meeting? Seeing none, back to council for final comment. Can we have a roll call, please?
Alderman Mazuka,
Yes.
Maladosian,
Yes.
Wilkening,
Yes.
Mayor Maloney,
I don't vote. I don't
Alderman Moran,
vote, right?
Yes.
Did you vote?
I voted.
Okay, sorry.
She was at the beginning.
All right, thank you. That concludes the mayor's report. We'll jump off with finance and budget.
Thank you. Just as a procedural note, when we discuss the FY18 budget amendment for the bike path project, we will also simultaneously be taking up item B1, the action item for the purchase order of bike racks. I believe they're tied together, so it really doesn't make sense to have them be so far apart on the agenda. And I have permission from the Chair of Public Works to do that. So with that, the first action item, I move to approve a one-year extension to the contract for fire department uniforms to On Time Embroidery Incorporated of Elk Grove Village, Illinois.
Second.
Thank you. Paul, I guess you're here for this.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. This is, most of it explained in the memo, but we went to bid a couple years ago for uniforms. We are happy with the vendor. He didn't raise the price last year, and then this year requested, as per the contract, for an adjustment, and the procurement officer reviewed it, proposed 1.8%, which the vendor agreed with. So we're just looking for authority to execute that final year, and then at the end of this year, we'll go out to bid again.
Thank you. Questions from the council? Alderman Maladosian.
The original agreement wasn't attached. Did the original contract rather have a CPI provision in it already? So
Yes,
that
sir.
language was there? And was it, just kind of open-ended to be agreed upon,
I
agreed
believe
upon,
that's
or was there a cap or anything like that?
I believe it was to be agreed upon based off the CPI, but it gave us essentially the right to put the number out there, which is what the procurement officer did.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the alderman? I have one. So, so we actually proposed the price increase?
Yeah, Mr. McGuire did, correct.
Okay. So we had an opportunity to either propose no price increase. We also had an opportunity to put this out to bid potentially.
Yeah, to be clear, he requested it to be reviewed, and I think that's what it was the CPI, and I think that's where McGuire got the number, bless you.
I'm sorry, he who requested? it
Sorry,
be
the
reviewed?
vendor requested that he said he'd like the price increase. And then, so he was the one that wanted the price increase. McGuire's just the one that gave him the number of 1.8.
Okay. And why did we choose not to go out to bid? It's $31,500, right?
I mean, we're happy with them. I think the prices were good. I guess we could have gone to bid one more time. This vendor was able to switch us from paper to everything being online, created their own website for us. So, I mean, there's some work to kind of switch vendors if we had to. But I guess that's the best answer for you. But we're
Thank you.
very happy with the product.
Thank you. Quick question for the city attorney, since we have 4 tonight. Does it take 4 votes to move this out of committee?
I don't have the vote for that, but I don't think so.
Yeah, I
And
don't
if
think
it-
so either.
Yeah, I don't think to move things it would. To spend money at the city council level, when you're actually approving it, then you're gonna need the 4 votes,
Got it.
or the majority of the entire council,
Right.
so. But not to move it out.
Very well, thank you. With that, Alderman Melodosian.
So, what's the 1.8% increase, the 31.5 is the cost of the normal, renewal, if you will, plus a 1.8% raise on top of it, just to be clear.
So we wouldn't spend any more than that amount of money. It's usually closer to 28,000, but with the new hires, there's a little bit more to get them up and running, essentially. And then the firefighters each get a $300 allowance to be spent. They don't always spend it. It's more of a quartermaster system. They don't get to keep anything if they don't spend it. But if, they need new shirts, they get new shirts, and they're allowed to spend up to that. So we won't spend all of that amount of money. That's just what's in the line item for our uniform
But
budget.
that number includes the 1.8% is rolled into that number, okay.
Any other questions from the Alderman? Seeing none. Out to the audience for comment or question. Back to council. All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Opinion of the chair, that passes. Next item up, I move to make a FY18 budget amendment for the bike path project and approve a purchase order for bike racks for the Summit Metro Station to FH Passion in the amount of $11,310. Wayne?
Staff is just looking for approval of these 2 budget amendments for the Bike Task Force initiatives in the amount of $20,302.50. The first one is for the $8,302.50 that was already approved by council by consensus to go forward. That's for the bike plan itself, which is ongoing at the moment. The second part is for the actual purchase and installation of bike racks by the Metro Station. The Bike Task Force went out and asked for proposals from 6 different companies. They received 2. This is the lower of the 2, and the costs are pretty close on those 2 proposals in the first place. So this budget amendment will take care of the initial $8,000 we were spending for the bike plan, and also for the installation and the first stage of the Bike Task Force plans for bike racks and bike paths.
Thank you. Julie, out of curiosity, who was my second on that?
There was no second.
Oh.
Well, then let's get that.
We
Second.
should probably get one. Good, thank you. With that, any questions from the Alderman? Alderman Moran?
I guess I'm a little confused on the fact that I get the $8,000 for the bike plan, But isn't that supposed to come back and tell us where racks should go and routes are gonna be and things like that, or is that a totally separate?
Yeah, it sounds to me like it's part of it, but most of that is for the bike path plan itself. I know our parking plan, the preliminary results of that has on there, we need some more bike racks in downtown area, and this would pretty much go along with that proposal.
Alderman Moran, I think, don't we have the chairman of the bike task force here tonight? Would you like to come up and make sure that we've clarified this properly for everybody? State your name and address if you wish to give it. Actually, your name, not if you wish to give it. You need to give that. But go ahead.
I'm Jim O'Donnell, and I live at 310 Northwestern here in Park Ridge. So, Alderman Moran, in answer to your question, when the Bike Task Force was commissioned, we were commissioned to go and try to find some meaningful, fairly quick hits that would make an impact in the community without spending a lot of money. So we identified two separate projects. One was a refresh of the 2005 bike plan to organize routes in the city. And the second was to implement more bike parking in town because it was felt that there was a need to do that. I would expand on that a little bit in that as part of the bike plan process of this thing, we went out for, we took a survey to get community input on this. We received 274 responses to our survey. One of the first questions was, what is your most desired location to bike to in the city of Park Ridge? And the leading answer was the uptown area of Park Ridge, south of Toohey, including the metro station. A second question was asked if it were more convenient for you, it wasn't, I take that back. Would you bike to the metro station if it were more convenient for you to do so? Now, it was, over 60% said, no, I don't take the metro. So of the remaining responses of the people that do take the metro, 2 out of 3 who currently do not bike to the metro station said they would consider doing so if it were more convenient. The last piece is, when we did the groundwork as to where to put these additional bike racks and what kinds, we surveyed every single location in this town. We went to the train stations, we went through town, we went to all the schools, we went to all the parks. On the day that we did the survey at the metro station, we found 39 bikes, which is 92% of the capacity at that station. And my final point would be, we expect that the demand for capacity could really grow in that the bike path plan that we're currently having our consultants study, one of the particular routes would be to come up off the main path at either Belle Plaine or Crescent and come up Fairview and come right onto Main Street where the bike parking is, which I think the two just is a great come together. So I would entertain any other questions, but basically they were two separate things. I know one has been before the council previously. This one is new.
Alderman Moran.
This is just for the racks, right?
That's
Wasn't there earlier conversation about some canopy over the racks to protect them from the elements?
There was when we first presented this, we presented it we presented 3 phases, and then there was a dreaming of the future, maybe we could cover it. So that was even beyond the scope of the 3 phases.
Just want to make sure this wasn't.
No, it's not. No, it's not. No, it's not.
Mr. Mayor.
Does the purchase of what we have in front of us tonight, does that conflict with the potential? And I know we didn't move forward with that, the coverage, but could what we purchased, if it's positive, work with a cover of some sort? I guess what I'm asking is, are we going to buy something now that would be not what you want, not what is wanted?
Sure. I have to let the guy that did the detail work on what we're proposing to buy to answer that question.
Jody Young, 205 Park Ridge, 205 Glen Lake and Park Ridge. I've been a member of the task force, and I've been sort of spearheading the bike parking thing. So, Mayor Maloney, to answer your question, there's nothing lost if later we want to put a cover over these. So that's it.
Okay.
Is there any other questions?
Alderman Maladowski.
So these racks would be on Main Street? Is that what's being?
They're actually on both sides. They're on the Summit side of the train station, and they're also on the Main Street side. Both of them have racks there today that are pretty broken down and inadequate, so we're replacing them.
I know it's been on social media frequently brought up and heard it in conversations. Is there any consideration about any kind of security? I mean, there's quite a bit of, at least bike theft that I've heard about at these racks by the train station. Was that part of any of the plans?
Security by way of like surveillance type security, or being able to secure your bike to a rack?
Well, I mean, the bikes are being stolen, so I didn't know, one might think that a camera might be a deterrent, but that's probably outside the scope of.
Yeah, we haven't taken on cameras yet. The racks that we have purchased are pretty much the system standard for public racks. They're made in such a way that you can't just cut them with a pipe cutter. And
If there's going to be a
steal things.
theft, it's not going to be because of any shortcoming of this rack.
No, not at
Okay.
all.
Thank you. Any other questions from the Alderman? Seeing none. Out to the audience for comment. You guys can step down if you like.
Thank you.
Oh, wait,
I
you
have
did.
one more question.
Alderman Moran has
So
a
you said we're
question.
replacing what's already there. So are we adding capacity at all with these?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
I think in the end, it's something like 40%. And add a little bit more about the covered. Actually, the train station today has covered parking. And it's a pretty antiquated system these days. So we're going to take out what's there, and we're going to put new parking in underneath the canopy that's there. The parking that's on this side of Main Street side, that will not have cover yet, okay?
Thanks. And we're not losing any parking?
We're gaining parking.
No, gaining bike parking, not losing any car.
We're not losing any car parking, no.
Glad we got that cleared up. So, anyone else in the audience on the budget amendment and the bike path, the PO for the bike racks? Seeing none. Back to the council for comment. Okay. I think this is a budget amendment, so the budget amendment is final action, correct?
No, it all goes to the council.
Oh, that's right, transfer is final action. So, all right. So in that case, we can do that with a voice vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Passes. Next item up, I move to reject all bids received in response to the request for bid number FN-FY17-03 for citation management services. Andrea?
So moved. Second.
Oh, sorry. I keep going too quick, John. Thank you.
As explained in the memo, staff went out to search for a qualified firm. There were 7 bids that were received, and 3 firms were brought back for an on-site interview to clarify and collect information. After that additional information was collected, all 7 firms were deemed non-responsive. We now have revised the plan, and a new bid event is planned in the near future.
Thank you. Questions from the Alderman? Alderman Moran.
Was this just a confusing bid that we put out to have 7 professional firms not respond properly, or, I know
I
Mr.
didn't
McGuire
find-
isn't here tonight, but
I didn't find it confusing. What we were trying to do is currently the secondary collections is tied to the handheld device that the parking enforcement officers used. And it was our intention to try to break those apart to see if there were any savings. And a big part of why they were rejected was that secondary collections was added into the bid response, even though we specifically were trying to exclude it. So that was half of the issue. The other issues were, I think, beyond our control. The three firms that included the secondary collections didn't have any other issues with the bid itself.
Gotcha. So just a more specific request for bids would probably get some good results.
That's the hope.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the Alderman? Okay. Out to the audience? Very well. Back to council for comment. All those in favor of rejecting all bids, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oppose? Done. Next item, I move to approve a purchase order increase for the high excess liability pool, or HELP. John?
Second.
Thank you.
I was yawning, I'm sorry.
That's all right. With that, Andrea, you get this one as well.
Both the budget and the FY18 blanket PO list included an estimated amount for our annual member contribution because the member contributions had not been established by the pool yet. We just recently got those annual contributions in. They were slightly higher than what our projection was, so there is enough budget to cover that. We are asking for a PO increase to cover the difference.
Any questions from the Alderman? Seeing none, out to the audience. Back to council for comment. Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Passes. Next item up, I move to approve the prevailing wage rate ordinance for the 2017 prevailing wage rates. I could use a second.
Second.
Thank you. So this one is, the staff contact is the deputy clerk, but Joe, or Julie, you'll take this?
This is just your annual prevailing wage ordinance. It's required by state statute that every municipality, well, every unit of local government adopt the current prevailing wages in June. So it has to be done in June and filed in July. So this is just the standard rate. Oddly, the Department of Labor has not updated their prevailing wages since June of 2015. So you're not really changing the prevailing wages because it's what you adopted last year and the year before, but you still have to adopt the annual ordinance. So this is just your,
The Department of Labor is an Illinois, a state of Illinois
Yes.
organization?
yeah. They'll get to
Enough
it.
said. Questions from the Alderman? Mr. Mayor?
What, it's for the city attorney, what does failing to adopt the act do to the city?
Well, there are some potential remedies under the act if a unit of local government does not adopt the prevailing wages. If we don't adopt it and we enter into a contract and our contractor or subcontractor doesn't pay prevailing wages, then we could be subject to penalties, interest. We could have an injunctive relief. The Department of Labor has the authority to go in and declare our contract void. So there's actually a laundry list of different remedies. Even if we don't adopt it, the wages still apply throughout the county anyway. But I would say with the ability to get socked with any number of enforcement actions, I think for the most part, units of local government just adopt the ordinance.
Has there ever been a unit of local government that has not adopted the ordinance, as far as you know?
I'm not aware of one. I know that there's talk every year. At least once a year, I'm at a meeting where there's discussion about not adopting it, but in the end, people just follow it. Because even if you don't adopt the ordinance, you still have to pay prevailing wages. So it's not, that's just one requirement of the act, is to adopt the ordinance. The other requirement is that any contract that we enter into, we have to provide in the contract that the contractor pay prevailing wages. And if they don't, and one of those employees were to challenge it, then they could go after both the contractor and the city.
Alderman Moran?
if we don't adopt this and still continue to pay prevailing wages through our contractors, can we get in trouble for that?
Yes, the act provides for the Department of Labor to be able to go in on an injunction action. It also provides that if we, let's say we don't adopt the ordinance and we don't put, well, the notice and the language in the contract with our contractor, that even just the failure to provide for it in our contract or providing the required notice could result in any contract that we've
But
entered into
if we
being
do
void.
everything the same as we've always done, but just don't vote yes on this out of principle, can we get in trouble?
Yes. The act does provide for penalties. There are different provisions in the act, and each one of them could be subject to the general penalties under the act. So it's adopting the ordinance, it's requiring certified payrolls, it's providing notice to contractors, it's actually paying the wage. So it's all the different steps that the city's responsible for. Obviously, a contractor can also be investigated and get in trouble for not following it.
Other questions from the alderman? Seeing none. Out to the audience. Back to council for comment. No comment. Okay. This one does take three, we can get out of committee with
You
three,
can
right?
get out, but it will
Okay,
require,
good.
right.
Good, just in case something happens. All those in favor of approving the prevailing wage rate ordinance, say aye. Aye? Oh, crap. Oppose?
Aye.
In the opinion of the chair, actually, I can go
Wait,
to a roll.
do you aye and on oppose,
No.
or aye on,
It's fine.
let's clarify the vote.
I was an aye on the nay.
Aye on a
That's what I
nay.
wanted
That
to
was
be.
what I was
Yeah.
confused.
Julie, let's do a roll call, please.
Maybe,
Thank
that's
you.
probably good.
Alderman Moran,
Why do I have to go first? Yes.
Mazuka,
Yes.
Milladosian,
No.
Wilkening. And Maloney. No.
Three.
No.
He doesn't need to vote.
3-1 for now. Next item, move to approve an FY17 year-end budget, move to approve the FY17 year-end budget transfers and amendments. Could I have a second? Thank you. Andrea?
As we do final transactions for FY17, invoices come in, and we record year-end adjusting entries and accrual entries. In some cases, it causes us to go over the budgeted amount that exists at the time. The municipal code states that we need to address those budget overages. So that's what this memo is requesting. I categorized the transfers and amendments by fund. So each fund has a schedule, and budget amendments, as I explained in the memo, generally either change the bottom line or they also include a revenue. And in most cases, it is a budget amendment because there is an offsetting revenue identified. Or in two small cases, there was a fund balance impact. These are, as I said, this is not uncommon to happen at the end of the fiscal year. These are all of them that we've identified as of today, but we will continue to process year-end adjusting entries all the way through audit work in the beginning of July. So there is a chance that some other cleanup items may come back to council at a later date. And I'm happy to answer any questions you have on the process or on any of the specific lines that we're asking for adjustments.
For me, I have a question on, this is really kind of a new format for us to see this, I think. I don't think we've seen anything done quite like this before.
We've done something similar in the past for larger adjustments for insurance lines and payroll lines. I opted to do this method as opposed to putting multiple individual memos out. I thought for efficiency.
Makes
And then
sense.
by categorizing it by fund, I thought that that might be helpful to see what the actual bottom line impact was. So, I believe there may have been one or two times that it's come in a similar format to this, but it isn't the standard, you're correct.
One other question, the pension payments for police and fire, They went up by, it looks like a total of $160,000 over what was budgeted. That's an expected increase and the result of our actuarial work and the council's actions. So that's not a surprise to anyone.
Correct.
Good, thank you. Any other questions from the Alderman? Seeing none, out to the audience on budget transfers. Back to council for comment. This is final action because it's transfers.
So the amendments have to come back.
They'll come back to the council.
So it's a hodgepodge. Okay. So some will, some won't. Okay, fun. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Oppose? It moves forward. So, next item up is discussion item in our tour of wage discussions. The next one is Cook County minimum wage and sick leave opt-out. Mr. Supan. The memo's from you, so.
Joe, did you want to comment on this before I got into it? No, you go ahead. Okay. This subject has come up earlier this year, and the mayor and I had discussed it a little bit, and he asked me to get it on the agenda for a discussion for the city council. I've done a review, agenda cover memo talking about what happened. They passed a minimum wage ordinance and sick leave ordinance that applies to all businesses in Cook County. It does not apply to local governments, local units of government. And oddly enough, and Julie may want to comment on this, it applies to school districts for the sick leave ordinance, which I don't quite understand it, but it does. The amounts out there start at July 1, $10 an hour, increasing to a minimum of $13 an hour beginning July 1. These are the Cook County mandates. Currently, the state minimum wage is $8.25. The sick leave ordinance provides that if an employee has worked at least 80 hours in a 120-day period, they will accrue 1 hour of sick leave for every 40 hours worked. Several cities are discussing it. There's a survey attached to this. The survey's kind of old, but it's still relevant. The list we put out, there was a list of communities who have decided to opt out. We got an updated list today, which I shared on the dais, so that everybody should have a copy of that. There's approximately 20 communities who have opted out. My understanding also is that Des Plaines and Niles are considering it as well. So the discussion here tonight is whether or not this council would choose to opt Park Ridge out of these two ordinances for Cook County and the impact that it may have on local businesses. Gail from the Chamber of Commerce commented. She did a survey of the members, and it was almost 50-50. A little bit more said they didn't want to opt out because they were already paying higher wages to compete with Chicago businesses. The others said they did want to opt out. So that was kind of almost 50-50. We've gotten 2 memos from school districts or emails that they both agree that they do not want to have to pay the higher wage. So it's compared to, I mean, it's all over the board, if you will, but we don't have an opinion on this. It's pretty much up to the pleasure of the council how they want to proceed.
Thank you. Julie, you want to provide some additional color?
Yeah, I would just say, we talked about this in February. You may remember that that's where we introduced it. It was shortly after Cook County had adopted the ordinance, and at the time, we knew we had some time because the county's ordinances do not take effect until July 1. So at that time, there were 3 municipalities in February that had opted out, and now, as Mike said, there are about 20 or so. And I think a good portion, probably half of those, have opted out in the last couple of weeks. As it gets nearer to July 1, decisions, I would think that you know, most municipalities that are going to make a decision would want to do it before the Cook County ordinance takes effect, because if you want to opt out, to wait until August or September, then you have employers in Park Ridge that are paying, they have to comply with the Cook County ordinance, and they have to provide the leave and pay the minimum wage. And then if you decided to opt out a couple months later, then it would all change. So I know even the municipalities that have decided not to opt out have at least discussed it and made a decision one way or another, or are planning to make a decision. Park Ridge as an employer is exempt, as are most other government entities, the state, federal government, townships and park districts and libraries. Oddly enough, and this just came up today, as Mike said, the school districts appear not to be exempt, at least from the sick leave law, because it exempts units of local government, and the state constitution says that a school district is not a unit of local government. So by that interpretation, the school districts in Cook County would have to comply, at least with the sick leave and maybe even with the minimum wage ordinance. Obviously, that's something for them to deal with. The penalties for this, there are no penalties to the city. One way or another, it's your decision to make, opt out or not opt out. It's not a penalty, your home rule. You have the authority to do this, to make a decision. Penalties for businesses in not complying. If the city were to opt out and a particular business in Park Ridge wanted to obtain some real estate tax incentives from Cook County, 6A, 7B, I forget there were a couple of different programs, that they would still have to agree and certify to Cook County that they will comply with these ordinances. That's a condition. They're not affected by our ordinance. That would be their choice. We would weigh the cost of complying with the ordinances with the incentives. Other than that, you know, obviously employers, if they didn't pay, if they didn't comply, could be in trouble. So if Park Ridge did opt out, employers, but there's nothing that comes back to the city one way or another. It's your decision to make.
Thank you. Questions from the Alderman? Alderman Melodosian.
So if we fail to opt out, would the schools be required to abide by these?
They would. At least the sick leave laws, it seems very clear that they are not exempt from the sick leave because it uses the terminology units of local government, and school districts are not units of local government. Their opinion, the school districts, and you know, I'm not their attorney, I haven't advised them, but presumably their own attorney has advised them that they are subject to both laws. So at the very least, they'd have to comply with sick leave and potentially the minimum wage as well. So if we don't opt out, yes, they would have to comply, and other private employers as well.
Okay. And Mike, can you, I read the summary from the chamber. Can you help me understand the rationale from operating a local business, why some wanted to pay the higher wages to be competitive, how this would help them, whereas if we opted out of this, they still could pay
Correct.
individually competitive wages. So can you help me understand why a business would want this regulation?
Well, if, just to be clear, if Park Ridge opts out of the ordinance, it's pretty much status quo is what we do right now. With the reasoning that she gave, the chamber executive director gave me, was that the businesses who are close to Chicago have employees they don't want to lose. They're good employees, and if they don't keep a competitive rate with those other businesses they're competing with, they'll lose those employees. So they're going to pay the higher rate, whatever rate they have to keep those people. That was her explanation to me. The ones that don't have that competition, then if we did opt out, they would have to pay a higher rate for their employees as well. That was she said it was basically the competition and their ability, the business's ability to keep good employees.
But those employers who would pay voluntarily the higher rate, should we opt out, they can do that either way.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Moran.
So, my firm is a member of the chamber, and I took the survey and was a part of some of the discussions with some of the folks who are here now and other chamber members as well. And there were folks on there who don't have any employees who were saying, we should not opt out, we should do this, it's about living wages and doing what's right for our fellow human beings, but it doesn't affect their business at all. And part of the discussion, you know, kind of evolved into this whole living wage thing. Well, there's a lot of jobs in Park Ridge that pay less than, you know, pay the current minimum wage, that it's not money that a family is needing to live on. It's a secondary source of a little bit of extra income, a few $100 a month, or it's a kid who it's their summer job or their high school job, and it's not money for paying the rent or paying a mortgage or paying food. So the whole survey thing, it was a great concept, but it was very basic, and there was no way to sort of break up the data into these are the size companies who want in or want out. It was just kind of open to everyone. I wouldn't put a ton of, and as you brought up, Alderman Maldosian, anybody can pay it. If they feel like they need to pay it to be competitive, then pay it. But a lot of businesses, and I think a lot of the folks who are here now, don't feel like they need to pay it in order to be competitive. And part of it's probably, if I feel like I need to pay it to keep good employees to be competitive versus businesses in the city, I want everyone else to have to do it too, because that'll help my business and hurt theirs, my competitors or whatever. So I just, that gives you hopefully a little bit of insight from the people who I know who took the survey and the discussions we've had.
Any other questions? Alderman Wilkening.
Just a comment. It seems to me that, in my estimation, the market will decide what we need to pay people. If the people that live on the furthest, you know, live closer to Chicago have to pay more for better employees, then they will do so. I think we have enough government meddling, no offense to the rest of us who are government here, and we should let the market decide. I don't want to hurt the little guy. I don't want to hurt the small business person who would be forced to either let some people go, and of course, any kind of increase will go into their bottom line. They'll have to increase their prices, and it all gets passed on anyway. So I'm not a big fan of this. Anything Cook County wants, I usually don't want.
Noted. Normally we do questions, but it seems like we're mixing just a little bit tonight, but you know, that happens. Alderman Maldosian.
I have a question, is that okay?
For you, sure.
For the city attorney, the home rule, what I've always heard is the home rule exemption could be whenever we want to do something that is more restrictive than like state law. Is that an accurate representation? I'm trying to figure out what is more
It's not the
restrictive.
only, that is one of the areas that, that home rule has the authority to do, but it's not the only. If in the Constitution is actually pretty clear on this, if a home rule county adopts an ordinance that applies outside of the unincorporated areas, which would affect municipalities, and a municipality adopts an ordinance on the same subject, the municipal ordinance controls. So, you know, with respect to a state statute, if there's some preemptive language, or it's restrictive, then we may be, even a home rule municipality may be limited. In this particular instance, we're not talking about a state law or a federal law or something that would preempt us, so it's not a preemption issue. It's if we regulate on the same topic, ours trumps Cook County. So in this, in looking at this, the Cook County State's Attorney, one of the state's attorneys, was actually asked that question by Cook County, and they've issued an opinion. The state's attorney has issued an opinion saying that home rule municipalities have the authority to, in essence, opt out or regulate in this area. We don't only have to opt out, we could set our own minimum wage. Obviously, it can't violate state or federal law. We would be preempted.
So should we want to opt out of soda Cook County taxes? We could do that.
Finance and taxing's a little different. So that's not a regulatory ordinance. So they've actually passed a tax throughout Cook County, and Cook County has the authority to do that. So no on that one, unfortunately. I would say that there are plenty of municipalities that would have would have
All
done
right,
that
I'll-
one.
I'll
Or
reserve.
gas tax, or, yeah, the Cook County sales tax or some of the other taxes, we're stuck with those.
All right, I'll hold off on asking about open carry then.
Perhaps another night. Any other questions from the Alderman? One thing just for kind of a point of order. The Alderman tonight received 3 letters at their podium. 2 appear to have been emails addressed to Gail Haller, and one, I'm still trying to figure out who that one came to. It ends with "Thank you, Nick," so I'm assuming that that's Alderman Melissa Scott. That may not be a correct assumption. Mr. Mayor?
Can I clarify?
Yeah.
I believe that, yeah, that is from Nick, who owns Perry's.
Oh, thank you, comma, Nick.
Yes.
Ah, different. Understood. Yeah, punctuation does matter. So what we're going to do, we're going to make sure that these emails get posted on the website. But again, the three letters, one was from Nick, who I believe is the owner of Perry's Pizza. One is from Martin Pierce, who is the president of Alpha Graphics. And one is from Lori Hines, who I believe is the superintendent of District 64. So we'll make sure those get out there. With that, any other Mr. Gilmore.
I just wanted to mention, as long as you were referring to the memos, excuse me, we also received one from Gail Mountcastle at the Park District, just before the meeting, and we'll get that one posted as well. She was stating that they were not in favor of the ordinances, and they supported opting out as well, even though they weren't directly impacted by it. They felt that the ripple effect by requiring surrounding businesses to pay higher would impact them, kind of compel them to also have to pay a higher rate. So we'll get that memo out on the web as well.
Very good, thank you. Seeing no more questions from the Alderman, out to the audience for comment. Sir, the gentleman in the red tie is first, you're second. We'll get to you, don't worry. Everybody gets a chance here. The one thing I'm going to ask is that when we have, a number of people who want to speak, we do typically limit it to 3 minutes. So if you could keep your comments to 3 minutes so everybody can get a chance at the podium, we'd appreciate it. So your name and address if you wish to give it.
Great. I'm John Breedeman, Breedeman Chevrolet and Breedeman Toyota. Thank you for this opportunity. As a partner in a family business with 350 employees between Park Ridge and Glenview, it's my recommendation that Park Ridge opts out of the Cook County ordinances, raising the minimum wage up to $13 an hour by 2020, and establishing requirements for employee sick pay. These ordinances are an overreach of the Cook County Board, whose regulations typically only govern unincorporated areas. So it's not surprising that there has been a steady stream of municipalities opting out of both these ordinances, including, and forgive me if I'm being redundant, Arlington Heights, Barrington, Bartlett, Buffalo Grove, Elk Grove Village, Elmwood Park, recently Glenview, Hanover Park, Hoffman Estates, Mount Prospect, Oak Forest, Oak Lawn, Palatine, Palos Heights, River Forest, Rolling Meadows, Rosemont, Schaumburg, Streamburg, Tinley Park, Western Springs, and Reeling. And again, I also understand that Des Plaines is very likely to also opt out of the ordinances. These municipalities have recognized that the lack of uniform implementation between municipalities, much less counties, would have created an unbalanced playing field for businesses, and that the issue may be better addressed at the state level. These municipalities also understand that these proposed Cook County ordinances fail to take into consideration other high-value parts of employee compensation packages like subsidized health care insurance benefits, subsidized 401k plans with company matches, paid job training, and paid vacations, which we do for all of our employees. Healthcare has become such a huge expense that our employees will accept a lower regular hourly rate, knowing that their health insurance benefits are worth far more than the simple increases in their hourly wages. We offer multiple subsidized healthcare options, including HMOs with $0 deductibles to help them. I should also note that under the Family and Medical Leave Act, qualified employees of larger employers that are 50 or more, which we qualify as, are already eligible for up to 12 weeks of unpaid leave for serious health conditions, or to care for sick family members, or to care for a newborn, with employers maintaining health care coverage just as if those employees were still working during that time frame. Passing these ordinances and increasing business costs has other considerations, which is the ripple effect I think that was referred to earlier. It leads to the elimination of part-time jobs. We hire a lot of high school kids in the summer and after hours. It makes it unaffordable for us to hold on to them. It would require us to cut back in non-essential full-time jobs that we currently have. Cutbacks on overtime at time and a half also would happen. At $9 an hour, you're looking at $13.50 for overtime. At $13 an hour, you're looking at $19.50 per hour in overtime.
Sir, you're at 3 minutes, so if you could wrap it up.
I'll wrap it up very quickly. Demands for increases by those already earning higher rate wages, and increases in costs passed on, and ultimately it leads to costs passed on ultimately to consumers. There's also a real possibility of conflicts with existing union contracts. We need to recognize that these proposed Cook County ordinances are an extra tax on Cook County businesses that employ individuals in positions making less than $13 an hour without any productivity benefits for the businesses. And I'm almost finished.
You're at 3:30, sir, so.
Okay, I've made my point.
I thank you for your
time.
Thank you.
Excuse me, John Sandrick, Fifth Ward. I'm not an employer, but like Alderman Wilkening, I am getting a little tired of Ms. Preckwinkle and her band of merry commissioners levying taxes on us. We have the sugar tax coming up July 1 that will levy a tax of 1 cent per ounce on sugared beverages. And now this. I think it is up to the individual employers to determine what works for them and their business, and I see no merit to staying in with this. I hope you'll opt out. Just as a matter of curiosity, and this is probably, what would happen if, given that our school district is the Park Ridge Niles School District, what happens if one opts out and one stays in?
I will ask that question after your time. Is that all?
That's it.
Okay, thank you. The city attorney, if you could answer.
Yeah,
the
I
resident's
don't
question.
have an answer to a question where the school, well, I should say the ordinance had, or the Cook County adopted administrative regulations to implement the ordinance. And the one thing that it said is if you had a corporation or business that had multiple locations, some in an opt-out and some in an opt-in, or maybe one in Lake County and one in Cook County, that they would have to comply for the place that was in Cook County. So I'm not sure for the school district how they work that, but presumably if for those school employees that are in one municipality that's subject to it, and maybe not in the other, that they would have to somehow spread it out. Now, I don't know that they've thought that through.
Substitute teaching at Emerson would become much more lucrative.
Very well. Next person, who would like to speak next? Sir, checkered shirt in the back. It is you. Name and address if you wish to give it for both of you.
We're Paul and Jerry Balage. We own Vive Therapeutic Massage here in Park Ridge. We live at 1035 Bonnie Avenue in Park Ridge.
Thank you for your time, first of all, in considering this and allowing us to share our opinions.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we're not quite as prepared as Mr. Breedeman was in his eloquent conveyance of his objection, but we do object to the Cook County ordinance. Partially on philosophical grounds, we believe that employment law should be the domain of the state, not the county, not the city. And as a matter of fairness, minimum wage and requirements on on sick time should be the domain of the state so that it can be spread evenly across all employers. We do feel that the Cook County ordinance is overreaching in that, on the pay side, frankly, we're not terribly affected. We generally pay in excess of what the minimum pay requirements would be. But the sick time is really troubling. The ordinance, as I read through the notes that were part of the ordinance, the county projected, I think, a 2% burden on businesses. What they did not take into account is the really large administrative costs to small businesses like ours. It would actually be closer to 6 to 7% of a burden for us because of the increased demands on administrative costs. And for small business, that's a lot to absorb. We feel like we pay very competitively, partly because we cannot afford to do, rich benefit packages like larger employers can. So where we can, we make that up in pay, and that's worked well for us.
And I'd like to add that our retention of employees is excellent. We meet with our employees regularly regarding how happy they are in working for us. And all of them are very grateful for how we treat them. They feel that they're being treated fairly. Even though we can't afford the big health packages, they are very grateful for the time that we give them off. That's one of the big things that they appreciate, even though they know we can't afford to pay them right now for that time off. But we give them benefits in other ways that help them have a balance in life. And as a small business, I don't think the government understands what impacts other things have on business, being able to stay competitive with wages and retaining good employees, but also keeping up with the property taxes. And there are now other taxes that the state is looking at and imposing on services that could be taxed as well. And we're also one of those disciplines that could be taxed for that.
You're at time, so
May I
very,
make
very quickly.
one other point, and that is that the county passed this ordinance, I believe, last July, and they gave, I think, is it the Department of Health is administering this for the county, and they gave them till June 1st to come out with guidelines on how to administer this. We have employees who are partly commission-based. We have no idea how to handle sick time for them, and to be given 1 month to implement something, assuming they come out with the guidelines June 1st, is kind of ridiculous. So.
Understood.
Thank you.
Thank you. Who's next? Sir, name and address. If you
Hey, Dino Vlahakis, 5 South Prospect. I think all the people made some good points, and in fact, I'm very pleased to see all the aldermen made some wonderful points, especially let the market decide. So I think you should opt out, and I'll give you one reason why I think it'll be a real benefit for Park Ridge if you opt out. We're the closest suburb to Chicago, and Chicago is going to $15. At me as a businessman, if I'm looking at, wow, if I go to Edison Park and I have to pay all my employees who are high school kids $15, and I could go in Park Ridge and pay minimum wage, I'm going to right away think of Park Ridge, not to mention that I think Park Ridge is a much better town than Chicago. So I think just that alone, if we opt out, it's going to be a big benefit for our city. We've already got some wonderful restaurants in town. In the last few years, we've had some wonderful places opening. You're going to see a lot more coming to Park Ridge. So that's all I want to say.
Thank you. Anyone else? Name and address if you wish to give it.
I'm Sheila Duda, and this is,
Fred Duda, 1501 South Vine.
but we're here representing T-Lula at 11 South Fairview in Park Ridge. We've been in business for 9 years, and our perspective is that we definitely do encourage you to opt out of the new minimum wage. And our reason is, we can pretty much echo what everyone else has said tonight, but in the 9 years that we've been open, we've hired about 24 or more teenagers, primarily students from Maine South. And for most of them, it's been their first job ever. And we withhold taxes on them. They become like tax-paying, contributing citizens. And if the minimum wage should go up, my decision would be to start looking for more experienced employees that I don't have to spend a lot of time hiring or spend time training. We sell tea from around the world. There's a lot of training that goes in. They learn geography. We also have sales training. So I would want to hire someone that could pretty much come in and get to work with, you know, very specific training on our products, but really have some experience and background to bring to the table. And that's really unfortunate because if we would have to go that route, because we've been so lucky with the teenagers we've had. Even the teenagers that we have fired have come back to us after many years, or some are out of college now, saying, you know, thanks, you did me a great favor. You taught me real, true life skills. So when they work for us, first of all, everyone that has ever worked for us knows exactly how much money they're going to make when we make them the offer. So no one has ever said, you're not paying me enough. Park Ridge already has the market working out the minimum wage. Like, I don't pay anyone $8.25 an hour. Everyone's higher than that because that's what everyone else in town is paying. So for me to stay competitive, I'm already paying above $8.25 an hour. But the value to these students, I think, is so important. Being their first job, they learn responsibility, they learn to show up, they learn to interact with all different kinds of people, to put their cell phones away for 3 or 4 hours. They learn what would happen, the direct consequences for actions. You know, we will fire kids, we will also promote them. And what's really nice too is if minimum wage went up to, like, say, 2020, $13 an hour, well, we sell tea, so we're gonna have to sell really expensive tea. I like when the kids work for us for 6 months, and then I can say, we're going to increase yours. You've done such a great job. You've really added value to our company. We're now going to increase you 50 cents an hour, 75 cents an hour. If it starts at 13, that's not going to happen. The other domino effect to that is I have a key holder. You know, an older person with more responsibility goes in, has a key, opens the store. That person at 13 now is going to want 16 or 18. So we're either going to have to reduce the number of people, which means we're going to have to work a lot more hours he doesn't want to do. But it just...
You are at time, so please...
All right, so I just think, you know, for the students that we try to serve in this community, that's my big fear of minimum wage increasing, is that there just won't be jobs for these kids anymore. And we like that we're able in the community to really help this particular group. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Seeing none, we're back to council. So what we're looking for here is consensus on next steps. And my perception, my read of the room among the council members at the moment is that opt-out is the likely consensus. Is there any, Alderman Melodosian?
Are you looking for a motion?
No, we are not looking for a motion, because this is just a discussion item. So this is just to get consensus on which way to go, and then we can bring, I believe, there is a sample opt-out.
We have a sample ordinance.
So we can bring that back as an action item at a very near meeting.
You could have it as action, or it could go directly to council.
Yeah.
So that's up to you.
Okay, very well. So that's the process going forward. So if we're all comfortable with the opt-out, we'll go that way.
Yes.
Any comment? So I heard one yes.
I apologize, I spoke
You're,
premature.
no, you're good. You had made your comment earlier, so I think you were okay. Alderman Melodosian, you're good with the opt-out?
Yeah, I just want to know if under new business I can make a motion.
Can't make a motion under new business. You can ask about, you can bring up new business, but you can't make a motion for action.
No, I look forward to some sample ordinance like that.
Very well. So I think, does staff have direction here? We're gonna bring back the opt-out and bring it back. Is there any objection to going straight to council for that?
No.
Among the aldermen? Mr. Mayor,
No, that's
fifth
what I
good?
prefer.
You got it. We'll make it so. All right. Next item up is discussion, it's an update really, I think, on Uptown Summit parking. This was a standing item, right?
It was, yeah.
So where are we at? How are things going?
Getting close. Just wanted to mention that we plan to have the parking study wrapped up and back to committee in June. The goal is to make the June 12th Public Works cow, and I think we can do that. So we've been back and forth with the consultant a few times with the draft, and we're getting very close and should be back on June 12th.
Alderman Moran, do you want to add anything to this, or you good?
No, just that
Yep.
June 12th will be a very busy meeting, and
Well, right.
potentially
there is
that's
the-
a stormwater discussion of level of protection. So we'll have, come prepared.
Popcorn?
Bring popcorn, bring some M&Ms. If you don't sit next to somebody who brings M&Ms for you.
Very well. Any questions from the Alderman about the progress of the parking study? Alderman Melodosian.
Do we have a date when we might be able to see that draft before?
Well, we'll get it out. We are meeting, I think, for a final review on the 6th, so we could probably get the draft out late that week, maybe 7th or 8th, 5 days before the meeting.
This one will not be one where it shows up night of the meeting. This one needs to be
Yeah,
It'll
no,
be in your packet at least by the Friday before.
It'll
outstanding.
definitely be at least by the Friday before, but I think we'll be able to email it out.
And it'll be online as soon as we can get it up online.
Correct.
Very good. Other questions from the Alderman? Seeing none, we're on to the Human Resources Review, the review and update of each union body, labor negotiations, grievances, update on the non-union body staffing changes, and pension update. Mr. Superman, your memo covers all of those, so go for it.
It does. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We will be negotiating with the ICOPS, our clerical technical group, on May the 30th. There's no report on the non-union body. We're in the process of interviewing for a few positions. The main one, the administrative supervisor, services supervisor in the police department. Pension update, they've got a couple of meetings scheduled, one July 26th for the police pension board and August 8th for the fire pension board. So I would entertain any questions.
Anything from the Alderman? Very well. Next up, Department Head Report. Andrea, if you would.
No report this month.
Well, that was easy. So that concludes Finance and Budget and Public Works.
All right, here we are, procedures and regulations. We have no action items, but a couple of discussion items. Discuss streamlining of city-initiated zoning ordinance amendment process. Joe?
Thank you. We had two items kind of teed up for this evening. One was postponed, that was Murphy Lake discussion, and the other, CPS 42. We're not ready. This was plucked from that standing list. It was discussed last summer, I believe, prior to my arrival. Since I've been here, we've done a couple of zoning amendments. There were several that filtered up from the Planning and Zoning Commission and were approved, and then we had a kind of a top-down approach. The short-term rentals was the example of that, where the Committee of the Whole or Council directed something to go back to the P&Z. And in fact, the P&Z is looking at an issue that was directed to them by the Committee of the Whole a month or two ago, and that's the expiration dates on site plan review. They're taking that up tomorrow. So just thought I'd pull this off that list, take a look, get your feedback or thoughts on this. I threw in two items that I thought, having worked with the ordinance now on a daily basis for about 8 months, that would be worthwhile to look at, and that would be accessory uses and electronic signs.
Any comments from any of the Alderman Mazuka?
Questions.
Or question, I'm sorry.
So your recommendation, so the title of this memo is about, streamlining city-initiated processes. But then there are kind of two things on here that seem to be, staff-directed recommendations. So I guess the first question I'm going to ask is about the streamlining part. Your recommendation says that staff, that in addition to either P and Z or the Committee of the Whole initiating, that staff may periodically forward suggestions to either body for consideration. So I guess one of the questions I have is, how exactly would you do that? Would you, the reason I'm asking is that, let's say we had, let's say we had a different staff.
Okay.
Hypothetically. And they thought, boy, the folks at the cow aren't, they're rough. They ask a lot of questions. We're gonna propose something through P and Z and go that way first.
Okay.
Or vice versa. So I guess, how exactly would you propose a staff-initiated amendment? Would your process prevent any kind of venue shopping for that?
Right. The Planning and Zoning Commission is tasked to forward amendments, recommended amendments to this body. Staff serves as support to the P and Z. In past experience, it's been common for the staff liaison, the director, the city planner, village planner, to inform the Planning and Zoning Commission. This is what we're seeing on a daily basis that for whatever reason is not working, and suggest that we look at this. There's then some discussion. The Planning and Zoning Commission says, well, next regular meeting, why don't you prepare a staff report and put it on the agenda? That's the way it's been done in the past. I mean, and I've done the same thing with the Committee of the Whole as well. But it's really the staff saying, this is what we're seeing on a daily basis, and this is where we feel there are some either potential problems on the horizon, or there's great room for improvement.
So I guess
Did that answer your question?
You've addressed what past practice is, and I guess for streamlining, it seems there are two paths you can take.
Right.
And it seems like making only one path would be, a way to make sure there was never, someone never tried to game it, that they always took the same path through if it was a staff-initiated discussion. And I think it sounds like the history is typically that staff would normally go to P and Z. That's the more common.
Here, I don't know. I'm just speaking from experience elsewhere. I think last summer, or maybe it was last spring, the Planning and Zoning Commission picked a couple items to investigate. And a few of those we looked at last fall. We did the purpose statements, plan developments, and then there's a couple more that never really made it up to either a public hearing or even at this level. That was some other purpose statements, site plan, review standards was another that comes to mind. So they never really filtered up that far. They kind of got stuck or buried maybe in a transition with director changing.
At that time, with admittedly a different staff, I think the Committee of the Whole had to do some expediting to try and get those, actually get those things moved through. But, I just want to make sure that, we don't have, the folks in P and Z getting whipsawed from, okay, here's kind of a top-down thing coming from the Committee of the Whole that's staff-driven, and then maybe a whole other stream that's coming directly to them. It seems like one path through this would make the most sense to me. The other question I had, you mentioned that you've been getting inquiries regarding electronic signs. I know we have one resident who has spoken about that point. But we went through I can't remember how long it took, but it took forever. And I believe that you mentioned that in prior jobs it took forever as well, and other communities you've served, to deal with the sign ordinance part of your zoning code. It is a chore, to say the least. So what are you hearing in the department that's causing you to want to open this knowingly wiggly and full can of worms?
The service stations is probably the first issue we hear from probably every service station in town. Some, it just seems like we tell them it's not allowed. They're back with another application a couple months later that we then deny, telling them it's not allowed. And again, we give them, various options about text amendments. And then there's been discussion ever since I've been here about the Park District submitting a text amendment for electronic signs. So it's really coming from commercial businesses and another unit of local government.
Gas stations in the Park District.
Right.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I guess my comment on the electronic signs, that's a full, not just the electronic signs, but some of the pole sign issues and
Right.
other issues we have going on around town too, the Dunkin' Donuts on Toohey, things we can do to clean up issues we're seeing that might be collateral damage to what was created with our recent revision of the sign ordinance, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that
Right.
whole point wasn't just for electronic scrolling signs, there's going to be some other sign issues.
It could be expanded, yes, it could. This was, let's start kind of small. I think right now, with the two entities I just mentioned, probably electronic signs is it's the most difficult, but would probably be the most useful for the community to take a look at, a revisit. The other issues, you mentioned the pole sign and the one issue that came up last week. I think there are a couple ways we can attack that now. I talked to the city attorney today, and I, again, took a look at our ordinance. There's a couple things we can use that I was unaware of to try and clean that up.
Thank you.
Alderman Mazuka?
Thank you. Just as a clarification, the glaring pole sign issue that we always hear about is the Dunkin' Donuts
Right.
on Toohey and Greenwood. And what had occurred at the council level, the discussion a number of years back, was that was actually a landlord-tenant issue. The tenant was more than happy to pay for it and make it happen, to remediate that sign. The landlord was not. So I guess jumping out of curiosity, what are you thinking we can do at this point that sounds better than jumping in the middle of a landlord-tenant issue?
Well, there is something in our zoning ordinance, not just our nuisance code, but within our zoning ordinance that speaks to sign maintenance, and I think that's, one of the hammers that we can get some movement there to at least have someone install a sign in. I mean, Julie had a suggestion today too, and now I'm drawing a blank what your suggestion was, but we were talking about the Dunkin' Donuts and the dry cleaner, that situation. There's the
Right,
pole
we
sign.
talked about the
It's
prohibition.
the prohibition.
The current ban on letting them change the content, and whether or not that's
Right.
something that legally we can enforce based on recent Supreme Court cases that give municipalities very little leeway in regulating sign content. So changing from Dunkin' Donuts to, coffee shop, whatever, that's a change in the content of the message, and we have very little authority to do that. So that's something that I think we should look at. I don't know enough about the specific issues, but I understand that there are blank places on this sign where there's no message, and that's because our code prohibits somebody from putting a new message in place of an old message on a non-conforming sign. And
That's correct.
right, which is an issue.
Right.
So this is something we're looking at.
Right.
Thank you.
Go from here. What do we? It's in your court?
I'm sorry?
I'm sorry, so where do we go from here?
Well, I'm just looking for, there's really three different ways that amendments that can filter up. And again, I'm fairly new here, and I've seen things done a different way. I briefly researched this. It sounded like it was a very inefficient procedure prior to last summer. There was a memo indicating this thing, amendments would go to the committee of the whole twice, then go up to council, then go back to a public hearing, and then come back up. We haven't done that since I've been here. Again, if there's any guidance at all, if you just want to continue having proposals for amendments initiated both within this body and both at the P&Z level, that's fine. If there's any particular guidance you want to give to them, I think they're gearing up for looking at another round of amendments. They had a couple that were kind of on hold. Really, just some guidance we can take back to the Planning and Zoning Commission, and
Alderman
I can't remember who our new liaison is now. That's you, okay, good.
Did you have a comment?
No, I just want to make sure that we go out to the audience in case
Oh, I'm
there's-
sorry.
Too.
Pardon?
I just have one comment,
Oh,
too. I just wanted to give some background as to why this was on the list. This was one of our legal recommendations in our procedural efficiency memo. One of the things that we had noticed since we had taken over as city attorney was that to initiate, for a developer or property owner to go through the zoning process, all they had to do was file an application, and it went immediately to P&Z. And it went through the due process, the hearing, the notice, and all of that. But if the city wanted to initiate a zoning change, then it had to go through 2 cows and 2 city council meetings before it even got noticed up for a public hearing and went to P&Z. And so that, I've never seen that in any community. And I think our concern was, moving things along. If the city really wanted to make a change in its ordinance, if it was something that was really important, you'd have 4 city council meetings to look at it before it even got published for notice to get to the P&Z. And then, of course, it comes back here because you are the ultimate decider on those things. So our recommendation was really to streamline that initial process. I don't think it was our intent to say the city council should have nothing to do with recommending zoning changes, because they come from staff, they come from P&Z, and they're certainly going to come from here. Things are going to come up, and you're going to say, staff, we'd like to see something happen. But my thought was, I don't think we need 4 separate city council meetings before it gets to the zone. I mean, really, the P&Z is the one that's going to hold the hearing. So if there's a way to streamline away from that, and I think that practically we've been doing that, but I think the thought was to get some input from the city council on sort of streamlining that process. So they could be originated here. Staff could bring them to the P&Z, and the P&Z can initiate them. And I don't think there's any intent to change any of that. Different ways of presenting it.
What you're saying, we'd cut out some of those multitude of meetings prior to.
Yeah, and I think we've done that. I know that the first reading, second reading, there have been ways that we have streamlined that, so first reading can be at the committee level and then go right to city council. So I know that you've done that already for those things, but I don't know that we've done anything formally with the initiating the zoning. So I think that was some input from Jim's department.
Alderman Mazuka.
Thank you. So, as a path for a city-initiated zoning amendment, you would think, as a streamlined path, and this is to the city attorney, consensus of the cow might be sufficient?
I would think so, because again, the process, the hearing process, the public input, the testimony, the evidence, really should be at the P&Z. That's what zoning due process is. So I think if this council or the cow, if it's P&R or whatever it is, says we'd like this particular section of the zoning code looked at by P&Z, then really it could be a consensus just to direct staff to publish notice and bring it to a future P&Z.
Is there any practical change in documentation or procedure that we would have to make if that was acceptable to everybody?
I don't think it's not in the zoning code. So I think it's just been a self-imposed process that it's gone through those levels.
And that would answer the question about one path, that staff would not bring something to P and Z without at least the committee of the whole having a chance to look at it and provide input.
Well, that's a policy decision for that, but I would think that bringing it here, I mean, that shouldn't be a problem from the staff's perspective to get an idea. Eventually, it's gonna come here anyway, so to have some thoughts on that. And we did that, I think Airbnb came here first.
It did. It came here and it was at the committee of the whole twice.
Mm-hmm.
And then it went to the public hearing.
Yeah, and I think that was an example of when we streamlined it a bit, because it didn't go to council. We had said, once it went through the committee, that we would go directly to P&Z.
All right, did that help?
It did.
All right.
Or just muddied the waters.
Or just muddied the waters. I'm not quite sure. And if I've forgotten anything, I apologize. Anybody in the audience wanted to have, no, right. I apologize. I'm learning the feel here, all right. Next thing was upcoming P&R items.
Madam Chair?
Yes, I forgot something.
So, I don't know, did we get consensus that folks were comfortable with that idea?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to
What
make sure.
about Charlie?
If I disagreed, I would have spoken up.
Good. So
It's not usually how this works, but
Okay.
I consent.
I'm good with moving through P&R first, and then staff can take it away from there.
All right. Next item is upcoming P&R items. And there's a lengthy list here. And I guess I will let Jim speak on that too.
Sure. We had Murphy Lake was originally scheduled for this evening. That was postponed upon the request of some other residents around the lake.
Right.
So we'll pick that up in June. 1-year expiration of permits, that's being taken up by the Planning and Zoning Commission tomorrow evening. That should come probably to this body, or may go straight to the, speaking of procedures for ordinances, would prepare an ordinance, and that could go straight to the city council rather than coming here.
Okay.
Right?
Have a feeling these are.
Streamline, yep.
Any comments? Questions?
So, other items on here, the MLK holiday bullet point, I believe that was for parking. We don't recognize that as a parking holiday in Park Ridge. We
Oh, okay.
enforced, so that'd be probably a pretty simple amendment to our existing parking holiday ordinance, that we could just throw on any future P&R agenda. And then the other couple of things, as I've left the Mayor's Advisory Board the last few weeks, I'd like to see term lengths and term limits be something that's consistent
Oh, I agree.
throughout our boards and commissions. Right now, we've got some, and I think it's police and fire maybe are regulated by the state, but some of the other ones,
Or
we have 4 years and 5 years and 3 years, and some can serve 2 and some can serve 3, and I just think if we could, and I know it'll take somebody a few hours on an Excel spreadsheet to figure out how to start staggering these as terms come up. But I believe somebody within this building is probably capable of figuring it out, and you know, it might take us 10 years before we get on that schedule, but I'd like to see us move in that direction so that, you know, whether we as a council decide, you know, every position is a 2-year position or a 3-year position, and everybody gets three terms or 4 before they expire. I just like that, I would like to see that consistent throughout.
That's a good idea.
And then the other item I wanted to potentially add to this, and I've spoken to our city clerk, Henneman, about this after her reelection, is potentially, I don't know the procedure, I've been told that it potentially might have to go to a referendum to remove the elected clerk position. I know a few years ago, we used to have an elected treasurer, I believe, in our town, and that was eliminated. And, Betty's done a great job and has been a great servant to our town for many, many years. But I feel like much of what's done from an administrative standpoint is run through our full-time staff. And I'm not convinced that the money that, the taxpayer dollars that go towards funding the clerk position is best used towards a part-time elected official versus internally within our staff. And would like to at least see that as a discussion item at a future COW to, with some background potentially from legal on what would have to do, is that something that has to be, because Betty's up in 4 years, so if we have to do a referendum 2 years from now, 2 years from this past
To be
April,
effective
to be
when her
effective
term's up,
at the
yep.
end of her term, she's told me that this would be her last term, she's not running again, and she is not offended by bringing this up.
And I've looked at this for, sorry, jump right in here, but I've looked at this for a lot of different communities. This is not uncommon for communities to look at that, and it does require a referendum, but you've got a lot of time. So, and the document, putting the document together, the question is, it's standard. We've done ordinances, resolutions for a number of other communities, so converting that, if that's something you want to do, this is a pretty straightforward issue with the ballot question and what you need to do.
Thanks.
I think we need to put those on the list. Anybody have any other items that you think? Alderman Mazuka.
Just as a question for the city attorney, city attorney mentioned that the clerk's position requires a referendum.
To go from elected to appointed, if that's what you wanted to do.
In the past, how was the treasurer position eliminated here? Do you know?
I don't know.
Because I don't think it was a referendum question here.
I think they're treated differently under state statute. I think you
That's
can
what I'm
adopt an ordinance to change a treasurer from elected to appointed, but the clerk is very clear that it has to be done by by referendum.
We need a clerk to be appointed.
You need a clerk because there are certain statutory duties that are
Could
like
be whoever we
elections for,
hire
yeah.
as clerk is.
Yeah, so
Okay.
it would be an appointed position, but it could be treated like an employee, so.
Great.
Yeah.
I just wanted to confirm that we didn't get some iffy advice in the
Yeah,
distant
treasurer's
past.
treated differently.
Very well, thank you.
We owe Mr. Bralla our back pay.
No. Yes. Mayor Maloney.
And just as a follow-up on this particular topic, if and when it comes up, I think it would be helpful if Betty were here. So again, that's
I just
something,
know she doesn't come to the PNR, but.
that's what I mean.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that means we shift this conversation to a different night when she's gonna be here otherwise, or not, but I think her input would probably be valuable.
Yep.
Anything further from any alderman or anyone else? Nope. Okay. And the final thing is department head report. Come back to you again.
All right, thanks once again. This is our report for April. Seems like ancient history to me now, looking back in April. We had a bit of personnel turmoil in April. We had one person tender his letter of resignation and left April 21st. That was a part-time, 30-hour month employee, John Sclafani. That was one of the positions that's now being advertised by HR that Mike alluded to. We hope to have that filled. We still had two of our plan reviewers / inspectors out with medical issues. One has since returned, the other scheduled to return June 1st, so we hope some of that will settle down. There's also, as you remember, heavy rains throughout the month. They generate quite a few phone calls and complaints about flooding, particularly on construction sites, so we handled those. Building permitting activity and fees are running pretty much consistently with the last 2 years. And that's it.
Anything else? I think that's it then.
Except for executive session.
Pardon?
No. that's
No,
it
I
for
know,
you.
I know. I mean, that's it for me.
You're good.
I think I'm good.
Any new business?
Charlie, did you say you had some new business?
I'll hold off on that.
Nothing? All right.
The Arts, July 28th.
July 20th.
I've been rehearsing. I've been practicing.
With that, I will entertain a motion to approve to to adjourn to closed session.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions? Audience? Back? Okay, all those in, can I do a voice vote on this?
Yeah, we did the roll call on the other one.
Okay.
Go ahead and do a roll call just to.
Okay,
get it
roll call, please.
Yes.
Yes.
Aye.
Okay. All right, we'll go ahead and take 5 minutes and then reconvene.